The golden rays of the Uyo sun filtered through the luxurious curtains of a grand mansion, casting a soft glow over the couple seated quietly at the dining table. Abbas and his wife, Ekaete, sat in silence, both lost in their thoughts. The mansion was quiet, unusually so for a couple who had once been the center of attention, joy, and endless laughter. Today, it was different, and everything had changed. For years they had prayed, hoped, and sought answers. Abbas, a successful businessman, was known throughout Calabar for his wealth and influence. Ekete, his beautiful wife, had always been admired for her grace and elegance. They seemed to have everything anyone could ever desire, except for one thing. They were childless. The one thing they longed for the most remained elusive despite all their efforts. Doctors and even prayers seemed to fail them. Each passing year deepened their sorrow, and whispers from relatives and neighbors became too loud to ignore. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the miracle happened. Ekaete, after so many failed attempts, discovered she was pregnant. It was as if the heavens had finally smiled on them. Abbas was overjoyed, and Ekaete was beyond herself with happiness. They made grand preparations for the arrival of the baby. Everything had to be perfect for their long-awaited child. A room was decorated in vibrant colors, with the finest baby items they could find. As the months went by, the pregnancy progressed smoothly, and their joy knew no bounds. One sunny afternoon, they went for a routine scan. What they discovered changed everything. It wasn't just one baby. No, it was triplets. 3 tiny lives growing inside Ekete. They couldn't believe their ears. Abbas's eyes filled with tears, and Ekete clutched her husband's hand. The joy they felt was unimaginable. Their joy had multiplied, and soon they would welcome 3 children into the world. The months that followed were filled with excitement. The news spread like wildfire, and everyone celebrated with them. Their home was constantly filled with family and friends, offering congratulations and gifts. Abbas's love for Ekaete seemed to grow even stronger, and their bond was unshakable. They were the perfect couple, living a life of wealth, love, and happiness. The day finally came. Ekaete went into labor, and the house buzzed with activity as they rushed her to the hospital. Hours passed, and finally the cries of newborns filled the air. 1, 2, 3. 3 beautiful girls were born, and Ekaete smiled through her exhaustion. She was a mother, and her heart swelled with love as she held her babies. But then the whispers began. The nurses exchanged glances, and Abbas's expression darkened when he saw his daughters for the first time. They were albinos, all 3 of them. Pale skin, light hair, and soft golden eyes. Abbas stared at them in disbelief. How could this be? He was a proud black man, and so was Ekaete. How could their children, their long-awaited miracles, be albinos? Ekaete noticed the shift in the room. She felt the tension, but her love for her children was immediate and overwhelming. She didn't care what they looked like. These were her babies, and she would love them no matter what. But Abbas's reaction was different. His joy turned to shock, and his shock turned to something darker. He couldn't understand how this had happened, and as the days passed, his feelings toward his wife and his new daughters changed. At first, he was distant, making excuses to stay away from the nursery. The once constant smiles he gave Ekaete became rare. He spent more time at work, and when he was home, he hardly spoke to his wife. Ekaete, heartbroken but hopeful, tried to make sense of it all. She thought it was just the shock of the situation, that with time, Abbas would come to love their children as she did. But time only made things worse. Abbas became cold. His once warm embrace now felt like stone. He barely looked at Hecate, and when he did, there was a deep resentment in his eyes. She couldn't understand why. It wasn't her fault after all. No one had expected this, but did it really matter? These were their children, innocent and pure. Hecate struggled to keep her family together, but Abbas was slipping away. Rumors began to spread. People talked behind their backs. Some whispered that Hecate must have cheated, that there was no way Abbas could father albino children. Others said it was a curse, that perhaps the gods were punishing them for something. Abbas's friends urged him to take action, to question his wife, to demand answers. The pressure mounted, and Abbas became more and more withdrawn. Hecate, for her part, poured all her love into her daughters. She refused to let the world's harsh judgments affect how she cared for them. She named them Imabong, Ika, and Idara, and they were the light of her life. Every day she watched them grow, their laughter filling the halls of the mansion, reminding her of the joy she once shared with Abbas. But Abbas couldn't let go. The more he looked at his daughters, the more he felt betrayed. How could this have happened? He started to distance himself further from Hecate, and their once perfect marriage was now filled with tension and unspoken words. The love that had once burned so brightly was now flickering like a dying flame. One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Abbas broke the silence that had been hanging over them for weeks. "Hecate," he said quietly, his voice filled with an icy edge. "I need answers. I need to know the truth." Hecate looked up, her heart sinking. She knew this moment would come, but she had hoped it wouldn't. "Abbas, what are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. Abbas's eyes burned with anger. "How can these children be mine? How can they be albinos when we are both black? Tell me the truth, Hecate. Did you betray me?" The words hit Hecate like a blow to the chest. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Tears filled her eyes as she shook her head. "Abbas, how can you say that? How can you even think such a thing? These are our children. I would never betray you." But Abbas wasn't convinced. His mind had been poisoned by the whispers of others, and he couldn't shake the doubt that had taken root in his heart. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said coldly. "Maybe this is a punishment, or maybe there's something you're not telling me. But I can't live like this, Hecate. I can't look at them and not wonder if they're really mine." Hecate's heart shattered into a million pieces. She had always believed in the strength of their love, but now it seemed that love wasn't enough. She looked at her husband, the man she had shared her life with, and realized that something had broken inside him, something she might never be able to fix. That night, Abbas didn't come home. Days turned into weeks, and Abbas's absence grew longer and more frequent. Hecate was left alone to raise her daughters, and while her love for them never wavered, the pain of losing her husband's affection was almost too much to bear. The mansion, once filled with joy and laughter, was now a place of sorrow. Hecate spent her days caring for her daughters, doing her best to shield them from the harsh realities of the world. But the whispers continued. People in the area talked, and every time Hecate stepped out with her children, she could feel the eyes of others on her, judging her, questioning her. One evening, as Hecate sat by the window watching the sunset, she heard a knock on the door. It was Abbas, looking worn and tired. He hadn't been home in weeks, and Hecate's heart leapt at the sight of him, hoping that maybe he had come back to make things right. But when he spoke, his words were cold and distant. "Hecate," he began, "I've made a decision. I can't continue like this. I need space. I need time to think." Hecate's heart sank. "Abbas, please," she pleaded. "We can work through this. We can make this right. These are our children. They need you." But Aber shook his head. "I need to leave for a while," he said quietly. "I need to figure out what I want." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Ekaete standing in the doorway, her heart shattered once again. Weeks turned into months, and Abbas's absence became a permanent fixture in their lives. Ekaete did her best to raise her daughters on her own, but the weight of the world seemed to press down on her. She didn't know if Abbas would ever come back or if their family would ever be whole again. The mansion, once filled with love and joy, was now a place of uncertainty and pain. Ekaete's only comfort was her daughters, who continued to grow and thrive despite the challenges they faced. But deep down, Ekaete knew that this wasn't the end of the story. She knew that there was more to come, more to discover, and more to fight for. And though the future seemed uncertain, she was determined to face whatever came next with strength and courage. Years had passed since Abbas left Ekaete and their 3 daughters, never to return. The pain of his departure lingered in the air, but Ekaete, strong and determined, refused to let the abandonment destroy her or her daughters. She had made a silent vow the day Abbas walked out of their lives. She would raise Imabong, Ika, and Idara to be strong, confident women, no matter the challenges ahead. And she did just that. Though the whispers in Uyo never ceased, though people pointed fingers and spread rumors about Abbas's disappearance, Ekaete kept her head high. She worked hard, doing everything she could to provide for her daughters. The girls grew up knowing the story of their father, how he left because of their albinism. But Ekaete never let bitterness take root in their hearts. Instead, she taught them love, resilience, and the importance of forging their own paths in life. As the years went by, each of the triplets blossomed into strong, intelligent, and beautiful women. Despite the cruelty of the world, they thrived. Imabong became a renowned lawyer, known across Nigeria for her advocacy for human rights and social justice. Eka, passionate about technology, became a leading software engineer, working with major tech companies and designing innovative solutions. Idara, the quiet and compassionate one, had a deep love for medicine. She worked her way through medical school, eventually becoming one of the top surgeons in the country. She didn't stop there. Her determination led her to open the biggest hospital in Uyo, a shining beacon of hope for many in the community. Though their successes were monumental, the memory of their father's abandonment lingered like a shadow over their lives. They knew the story well, how Abbas couldn't accept them because they were albinos, how he had left their mother to care for them alone, and how he had never once tried to reach out to them. That pain, though buried, still remained, a scar on their hearts. Meanwhile, Abbas's life had taken a different path. After leaving Ekaete, he remarried, trying to rebuild his life with another woman, hoping to erase the past. He distanced himself completely from his first family, never looking back, pretending they didn't exist. His new wife bore him children, and for a time, Abbas convinced himself that he had made the right choice, that this new life would bring him the happiness he sought. But as the years passed, life didn't turn out as he had expected. His second marriage was fraught with troubles, and the guilt of abandoning his daughters and Ekaete began to weigh heavily on him. But pride kept him from reaching out. He kept living, hoping the pain would go away, until one day, something unexpected happened. Abbas fell gravely ill. His health declined rapidly, and despite seeing many doctors, there was no improvement. His kidneys were failing, and he was in desperate need of a transplant. His condition grew worse by the day, and the doctors told him bluntly, without a kidney transplant, he wouldn't survive. Desperation set in. His second wife, seeing the gravity of the situation, tried everything she could to find a donor, but nothing worked. Abas's chances were running out, and he knew it. He had no choice but to seek help from the best hospital in the region, one that had gained a reputation for its state-of-the-art facilities and top-notch medical care. That hospital was owned by none other than his daughter, Dr. Idara. Abbas didn't know this when he arrived at the hospital in Uyo, clinging to the last shred of hope that he could be saved. As he was wheeled into the hospital, weak and frail, he barely noticed the name on the building, Idara Medical Center. When Idara's staff notified her that a critically ill patient had been admitted for an emergency transplant consultation, she immediately went to review his case. But when she entered the room, her heart nearly stopped. There, lying on the hospital bed, was her father, the man who had walked out of her life so many years ago. The man who couldn't accept her and her sisters because they were different. Abbas's eyes fluttered open, and when he saw the doctor standing before him, his heart froze. His mind struggled to process what he was seeing. This woman, this successful doctor standing in front of him, was his daughter, one of the very daughters he had abandoned. "Idara?" he whispered, his voice weak and shaky. Idara stood still, her emotions swirling inside her like a storm. She hadn't seen her father in over 2 decades. She had heard of his new life, his new family, but never in her wildest dreams had she imagined that he would end up here, in her hospital, on the brink of death. Abbas's eyes filled with tears as he realized the full weight of his actions. The daughter he had rejected, the child he couldn't love because of her appearance, was now standing before him, the one person who could save his life. "Idara, He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for everything." For a long moment, Idara didn't say a word. She looked at the man who had caused her and her sisters so much pain, the man who had walked away without a second thought. Memories of her childhood, of her mother's struggles, of the whispers and the judgment, all of it came flooding back. But she was not the same little girl anymore. She was a strong, accomplished woman, and despite the pain he had caused, she had grown into someone her mother would be proud of. She took a deep breath and spoke calmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "You abandoned us, Papa," she said quietly, the weight of the words hanging in the air. "You left us because we were different, because you couldn't accept us for who we are." Abas's tears flowed freely now. "I was wrong," he whispered. "I was so wrong. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But please, Idara, I need your help." Idara looked at him, her heart conflicted. She had spent years trying to heal from the wounds he had inflicted, years building her life without him. Now, here he was, asking for her help, asking for a second chance at life. In that moment, memories of her mother's strength filled her heart. Ekaete had always taught her and her sisters the power of forgiveness, even in the face of great pain. But this was different. This was personal. After a long silence, Idara finally spoke. "You don't deserve my forgiveness, Dad. You broke our hearts. You left us to fend for ourselves, and Mum had to raise us alone. But I am a doctor. My job is to save lives, no matter who the person is." Abbas closed his eyes, the weight of his guilt almost unbearable. He knew he didn't deserve her mercy, but the fact that she was willing to help him spoke volumes about her character. "Thank you," he whispered, barely able to speak. Idara turned away, her heart heavy. She knew what she had to do, but it didn't make it any easier. She would save his life, but the emotional wounds would take much longer to heal. The surgery was successful. Abbas received the transplant, and slowly his health began to improve. but the relationship between him and his daughters remained strained. Abbas's second wife, overwhelmed by guilt and the weight of her husband's past, left him shortly after his recovery, leaving him alone to face the consequences of his actions. In the end, Abbas sought to rebuild the bridges he had burned, but it was a long and difficult journey. His daughters, while compassionate, did not easily forget the years of abandonment. They continued to live their lives, each successful in their own right, but the scars of their past were not so easily healed. And as for Abbas, he spent the rest of his days trying to atone for his mistakes, knowing that some wounds may never fully heal. The future remained uncertain, but one thing was clear: forgiveness was a journey, and whether or not Abbas would fully regain the love of his daughters was a story that had yet to be written. Would Abbas find redemption, or had he lost his family forever? Only time would tell. And that, dear viewers, is where we leave you, for now. The journey of Abbas, Ekaite, and their daughters is far from over. The choices they will make next could change everything. Will the scars of the past heal, or will the pain of abandonment be too much to overcome? The answer lies ahead, in the next chapter of this emotional and powerful story. We want to thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Your time, your support, it means the world to us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button to show your support. And if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next part. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below. What do you think will happen next? Will Abbas find redemption? Will his daughters fully forgive him? Let us know. And of course, share this story with your friends and family so they can experience this powerful journey too.